I want to talk about, I want to add a little bit, I suppose, to one of the things that I was talking about in the previous video about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. If you're reading Daniel 3, verse 28, it says, after, they're put in the fire and they come out, it says, starting in verse 28 of Daniel 3, Nebuchadnezzar responded and said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants, who put their trust, their faith, their trust in him, violating the king's command and yielding up their bodies so as not to serve or worship any god except their own God." That's why they were rewarded. They chose not to serve other gods. Just like Joshua said, "Choose this day whom you will serve, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." That's our choice. That's our choice today. Who are we going to serve? Who are we going to trust? Who are we going to have faith in? 20, verse 29 says, "Therefore I make a decree that any people, nation, or tongue that speaks anything offensive against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their house reduced to a rubbish heap, inasmuch as there is no other God who is able to deliver in this way." Then the king caused Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to prosper in the province of Babylon. And then you go on to read about Nebuchadnezzar. But basically, I read that to show you that, our faith can be the greatest testimony. Their faith and their willingness to be tried was important. And then we read in Daniel 6 about Daniel in the lion's den. I start in verse 10. I would encourage you to read the whole context about how there was a decree saying that anyone who prayed to anyone but the king shall be thrown in the lion's den for 30 days. That's in verse 7. Or any gods or any man besides you, king. That's in verse 7. Then you see in verse 10. Now, when Daniel knew that the document was signed, he entered his house, now in his roof chamber. He had windows open toward Jerusalem, and he continued kneeling on his knees 3 times a day, praying and giving thanks before his God, as he had been doing previously. Then these men came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and supplication before his God. Then they approached and spoke, "Did you not say that all the..." And it goes through, and you read verses, and so Daniel's thrown in the lion's den. You read in verse 16 of chapter 6. Then the king gave orders, and Daniel was brought in and cast into the lion's den. The king spoke and said to Daniel, "Your God, whom you constantly serve, will himself deliver you." A stone was brought and laid over the mouth of the deal. And the king was troubled. But then, verse 19, then the king arose at dawn, at the break of day, and went in haste to the lion's den. When he had come near the den to Daniel, he cried out with a troubled voice. the king spoke and said to Daniel, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you constantly serve, been able to deliver you from the lions? Then Daniel spoke to the king, O king, live forever. My God sent his angels and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me, inasmuch as I was found innocent before him, and also toward you, O king. I have committed no crime. Then the king was very pleased and gave orders for him to be taken out. And so you see that Daniel was saved because he chose, even though there was a decree not to pray, he still did. And that we need to learn from that. And it was a testimony. Here's in verse 26, it says, I make a decree that in all the dominion of my kingdom, men are to fear and tremble before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and enduring forever. And as his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed, and his dominion will be forever, he delivers and rescues and performs signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. Who has also delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. So this Daniel enjoyed success in the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus of Persia. So we read those things, and that should be an encouragement to us, that those that are faithful to him are rewarded. And then we read in Matthew 10, starting in verse 28, do not fear those who kill the body, but are unable to kill the soul, but rather fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. 2 sparrows sold for a cent, and yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. But the very hairs of your head are numbered. So do not fear. You are more valuable than many sparrows. So you see there in those verses so far that every hair of our head is numbered, and mine is thinning, obviously, and my hairs are getting less and less, but God knows every single one of them. And I was looking last night at the stars, and to look at the vastness of the entire all the heavens and the universe, and to think he created this whole thing, and yet he knows he's numbered every hair on my head. What do I need to fear? He who kneels before God can stand before anyone. That's why I'm wearing this shirt, is to show, we need to learn this part. Then we read in verse 32, therefore everyone who confesses me before men, I will confess him before my Father who is in heaven. But whoever denies me before men, I will also deny him before my Father who is in heaven. Do not think that I came to bring peace on the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I came to set man against his father. And, basically, we must seek him and follow him no matter what the cost. Daniel was saved. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego was saved. And it was for God's glory. Same when we go before trials. We will be dragged before courts. It says in Matthew 24. It also says that if you read Matthew 24, it talks about wars and rumors of wars, and they will drag you before courts. And it also said that in Matthew 10. And it even says at one point that men's hearts will fill them in anticipation of what is to happen. But we see in Matthew 24, you see that the different things that have to happen. You read the whole chapter. It also is in Mark 13. And also you will find it in Luke 21. I would highly suggest you read all those things, because just like it talks about in the days of Noah, if you read in Luke's account of that part of it, in Luke 17, I believe it is, where it says, the flood came and destroyed them all. Talking about as in the days of Noah. But we should have faith, because we are grafted into Israel. Israel was saved in Egypt. They were saved from the plagues. You can read about the plagues. They were saved from the plagues. They had light and everyone else had dark. Their cattle were not afflicted. I mean, on and on and on. So we need to realize this, that we need to have faith. Walk by faith, not by sight. And you can read about them in the wilderness. Their clothes didn't wear out for 40 years in the wilderness. God provided them manna. He provided them quail to eat. He provided all these things. So we have nothing. There's nothing that we should not have faith in Him and trust in Him for what's coming. We must trust Him for everything and not worry about what happens here. If we die, we die. If we live, we live. We were put in this time for a reason, and we need to be up at the plate, and we're going to suffer, most likely. But you know what? It's not about what happens in this world. It's about what happens in eternity.